The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Belmont Conservatory's main audition hall, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Outside, autumn leaves danced in the breeze, but inside the atmosphere was thick with nervous energy. Dozens of young pianists sat scattered across the velvet seats, some running through finger exercises in their laps, others staring blankly ahead, lost in mental rehearsals of the pieces they'd spent months perfecting. This wasn't just any audition. The annual Belmont Scholarship was one of the most prestigious awards a young musician could receive. It meant 3 years of world-class training, access to master classes with renowned performers, and a reputation that could launch a serious career. The competition was fierce. Out of nearly 200 applicants, only 30 had been invited to audition in person, and from those 30, just one would walk away with the scholarship. 12-year-old Maya Chen sat in the third row, her small hands resting gently on her mother's arm. She couldn't see the nervous faces around her or the grandeur of the historic hall, but she could feel everything: the subtle vibrations of footsteps on the floor, the soft rustle of sheet music being shuffled, the barely audible whispers of competitors sizing each other up. And beneath it all, there was the piano on stage, waiting silently like an old friend. Maya had been blind since birth, a rare condition that the doctors had explained to her parents using words like optic nerve hypoplasia and irreversible. But what the doctors hadn't predicted was how Maya's other senses would sharpen to compensate. By age 2, she could identify family members by the sound of their footsteps. By age 3, she knew every room in her house by its unique echo. And by age 4, when her mother first sat her down at their old upright piano, Maya discovered something magical. She heard the middle C note, and somehow she just knew. Not just that it was middle C, but everything about it: the warmth of its tone, the way it resonated through the wooden frame, how it related to every other note on the keyboard. Within weeks, she was picking out simple melodies. Within months, she was playing songs she'd heard only once. Her mother, a physician with no musical background herself, watched in amazement as her daughter's fingers found their way across the keys with increasing confidence. Now, 8 years later, Maya had progressed far beyond simple melodies. She had worked with 3 different piano teachers, each one initially skeptical, then ultimately amazed. She had memorized hundreds of pieces, from Bach to Beethoven, from Chopin to contemporary composers. She practiced 4 hours a day, sometimes more, her fingers building the muscle memory that allowed her to navigate the 88 keys as naturally as other kids rode bicycles. But she had never performed in front of judges before. Never faced the kind of scrutiny that came with a competition like this. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" her mother whispered, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Maya smiled, though her stomach was doing flips. "Nervous, but ready. You're going to be wonderful, just like always." The door at the back of the hall suddenly swung open and the murmur of conversation died instantly. Heavy footsteps echoed through the space, measured and confident. Maya couldn't see the man who had entered, but she heard the immediate shift in the room's energy. People sat up straighter. Whispers became even softer, more urgent. "Is that really him?" Someone hissed a few rows behind them. "Victor Rostov, in person. I can't believe it." Maya felt her mother tense beside her. She had heard that name before. Victor Rostov was a legend in the classical music world. A Russian pianist who had won every major international competition before age 25, who had performed in the greatest concert halls across the globe, who was known not just for his technical brilliance but for his intense, almost fierce interpretations. He was also known for something else, something her last teacher had mentioned with a slight grimace: his brutal honesty. "Rostov doesn't sugarcoat anything," her teacher had warned. "If he's judging, expect him to say exactly what he thinks, no matter how harsh." The footsteps continued across the hall and up onto the judge's platform. Maya heard the creak of a chair, the rustle of papers being arranged. Then a voice, deep and accented, addressed the room. "Good morning. I am Victor Rostov, and I will be serving as guest judge for today's auditions. Let me be clear about something from the start." He paused, and Maya could feel the weight of his presence even from where she sat. "I am not here to encourage mediocrity. I am not here to give false praise. Music at this level requires absolute dedication, natural talent, and the ability to push beyond what is comfortable. If you are not prepared to hear the truth about your playing, perhaps this is not the right path for you." Several candidates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Maya felt her heart beating faster. The head judge, Professor Morrison, cleared his throat. Thank you, Mr. Rostov. Let's begin. Our first candidate is David Park. Please come to the stage. For the next 2 hours, Maya listened as one pianist after another took their turn. Some played beautifully, receiving polite applause and measured feedback. Others stumbled through their pieces, earning painful silences and Rostov's cutting comments. Your technique is adequate, but you play without understanding, he told one girl. You have memorized the notes, but not the music, he said to another boy. Maya's name was getting closer. She ran through her chosen piece in her mind for the 100th time that day, Chopin's Revolutionary Etude. It was an ambitious choice, perhaps too ambitious. Her teacher had suggested something safer, something that would show her skills without taking unnecessary risks. But Maya had insisted. If she was going to do this, she wanted to play something that meant something to her, something with fire and passion and rage, like the emotion she felt whenever someone assumed she couldn't do things because of her blindness. Maya Chen, Professor Morrison's voice rang out. This was it. Maya stood up, her white cane in her left hand, her mother's steadying hand on her shoulder. You've got this, her mother whispered. I love you. Maya began making her way down the aisle toward the stage, her cane tapping gently ahead of her, counting steps, feeling for any obstacles. She had practiced walking to unfamiliar stages before, but never one this important. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. She reached the stage stairs and began climbing carefully, steadily. She was 3 steps from the piano when the voice cut through the air like a knife. Stop. It was Rostov. Maya froze, her hand gripping her cane tighter. This is a waste of everyone's time, the pianist continued, his accent making each word sharp and precise. How can someone who cannot even see the keys possibly play at a competitive level? This is not a charity event. This is a serious audition for a serious scholarship. The hall went completely silent. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Behind her, she heard her mother's sharp intake of breath, the scrape of a chair as she started to stand up. But Maya just stood there, her white cane trembling slightly in her hand, her dream suddenly feeling very, very far away. The silence that followed Viktor Rostov's words was deafening. Maya stood frozen on the stage steps, her white cane still in her hand, trying to process what had just happened. Had he really just said that? Had he really just dismissed her before she'd even played a single note? Behind her, she heard the unmistakable sound of her mother's chair scraping violently against the floor. Dr. Lisa Chen was not someone who stayed quiet in the face of injustice. Maya had seen her stand up to insurance companies, hospital administrators, and anyone else who tried to put limits on what her daughter could achieve. And right now, Maya could practically feel her mother's anger radiating across the audition hall. Excuse me? Her mother's voice rang out sharp and clear. She was walking down the aisle now, her footsteps quick and purposeful. I need to address what was just said. Ma'am, please, Professor Morrison started. But Lisa Chen was already at the judges' table. My daughter has been playing piano since she was 4 years old, Lisa said, her voice steady but fierce. She has perfect pitch. She can memorize complex compositions after hearing them just once. She practices 4 hours every single day. She has studied under some of the finest teachers in this city, and every single one of them has told us that she has extraordinary talent. Viktor Rostov leaned back in his chair, his expression unmoved. I do not doubt that your daughter has worked hard, Mrs. Chen. But hard work alone does not make up for fundamental limitations. Professional piano performance requires visual precision. It requires the ability to read music in real time, to see the conductor, to coordinate with other musicians. These are not small things. They are essential. She doesn't need to see the keys, Lisa countered. Her fingers know where they are. She doesn't need to read sheet music because she remembers everything she hears. And as for coordination, she's been playing duets with her teachers for years without any problems. Playing duets in a practice room is not the same as performing on a professional stage, Rostov said, his tone dismissive. I understand that as a mother, you want to support your child's dreams. But sometimes the kindest thing we can do is help people understand their realistic limitations. False hope can be more cruel than honest truth. Maya felt something twist in her chest. False hope. Is that what he thought this was? All those years of practice, all those pieces she'd learned, all those moments when music had made her feel truly alive? Was that all just false hope? One of the other judges, a woman named Dr. Patricia Wells, cleared her throat. Mr. Rostov, with all due respect, I think we should at least let the young lady audition. That's why she's here. That's why we invited her. I agree, added the third judge, an older gentleman named Professor Chen, who was no relation to Maya's family. We've listened to everyone else today. It seems only fair to extend the same courtesy to this candidate. Rostov shook his head. Fairness is not about treating everyone the same. It's about being honest about what is possible and what is not. We have limited time today, and there are other candidates who actually have a realistic chance at this scholarship. Why waste those precious minutes on a performance that, no matter how earnest, cannot possibly meet the standards required? Maya heard every word, and each one felt like a small cut. But something else was happening too. Beneath the hurt, beneath the humiliation, something was stirring. She had faced doubt before. She had heard people whisper that she wouldn't be able to do normal things, that she'd need constant help, that certain dreams were simply out of reach, and every single time she had proven them wrong. She thought about the first time she had played in front of her kindergarten class, when the other kids had gasped in surprise. She thought about her first recital, when her teacher had tears in her eyes afterward. She thought about last month, when she had performed at a nursing home and an elderly woman had told her it was the most beautiful thing she'd heard in 40 years. Those moments were real. They weren't false hope. They were proof that she could do this. Maya's hand tightened around her cane. Her mother was still arguing with Rostov, their voices growing more heated. Professor Morrison was trying to mediate. The other candidates were watching in uncomfortable silence. And Maya realized something. She could leave right now. She could turn around, walk back down that aisle, and never have to face this humiliation again. Or she could fight. The decision crystallized in her mind with sudden clarity. She took a breath, gathering every ounce of courage she had, and spoke. Please. Her voice came out quieter than she intended, barely above a whisper, but in the tense silence of the hall everyone heard it. The arguing stopped. Her mother turned toward her. Please, Maya said again, louder this time. Let me play. Just one piece. If you still think I'm wasting your time after that, I'll leave. I promise. But please just let me try. She was trembling now, her fingers gripping the cane so hard they hurt. She couldn't see Rostov's face, couldn't read his expression, but she could feel his presence, could sense him studying her. Sweetheart, you don't have to do this, her mother said softly, walking back toward her. Not after what he said. We can file a complaint. This is discrimination. I know, Mom, Maya said, but I want to play. I need to. Because it wasn't just about the scholarship anymore. It wasn't even about proving Rostov wrong, though that was definitely part of it. It was about every kid who had ever been told they couldn't do something because of how they were born. Every person who had been judged before they'd been given a chance. Every dream that had been dismissed as unrealistic before it even had a chance to grow. Professor Morrison looked at his fellow judges. Dr. Wells nodded immediately. Professor Chen did the same. They both turned to Rostov, waiting for his response. The famous pianist was quiet for a long moment. Maya could hear him shifting in his chair, could imagine him weighing his options. Finally he spoke. Fine, one piece. But I want it on record that I believe this is a mistake. Noted, Professor Morrison said quickly before Rostov could change his mind. Miss Chen, you may proceed to the piano. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. Her mother squeezed her shoulder one last time, whispering, I love you. Before stepping back, Maya began making her way up the remaining steps to the stage, counting each one, feeling the texture of the floor change beneath her feet. She reached the piano and carefully folded her cane, setting it beside the bench. She sat down, adjusting her position, feeling for the edges of the keyboard. Her hands were shaking slightly. She took a deep breath, then another, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside her. This was it. Everything came down to the next few minutes. She had chosen Chopin's Revolutionary Etude for a reason. It was a piece born from anger and frustration, written by Chopin after the failed Polish uprising against Russia. It was music filled with defiance, with the rage of someone who refused to accept defeat. Right now, Maya understood exactly how Chopin must have felt. She placed her fingers on the keys, finding the starting position. The hall was completely silent. 30 candidates, 3 judges, and her mother all watching, all waiting. Maya closed her eyes even though it made no difference. She thought about every practice session, every scale, every arpeggio, every hour she'd spent at the piano. She thought about why she loved music so much. how it made her feel connected to something bigger than herself, how it let her express things she couldn't put into words, and then she began to play. The first notes exploded from the piano like thunder. Maya's right hand launched into the opening melody while her left hand attacked the keys with a cascading run that seemed to tumble down the keyboard like an avalanche. This wasn't gentle music. This wasn't the kind of pretty, delicate playing that people sometimes expected from a 12-year-old girl. This was raw, powerful, and absolutely fearless. Chopin's revolutionary etude was notorious among pianists. The left hand alone was enough to defeat many professional players, requiring incredible strength, speed, and precision as it raced through continuous 16th notes at a breakneck tempo. The right hand, meanwhile, had to sing out the melody above all that chaos, clear and defiant. Doing both at once while maintaining perfect balance was something that separated good pianists from great ones. Maya's fingers flew across the keys as if they had a life of their own. In the audience, several people sat up straighter, their eyes widening. A boy who had performed earlier leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. One of the mothers who had been checking her phone quickly put it away, her attention completely captured. Even the candidates who had been nervously reviewing their own music stopped and simply listened. On the judges' panel, Professor Morrison's eyebrows rose higher with each passing measure. Dr. Wells had set down her pen and was watching intently, a look of surprise on her face. Professor Chen was nodding slowly as if confirming something he had suspected all along. And Victor Rostov? The smirk that had been on his face since Maya sat down was beginning to fade. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing, focusing completely on the small figure at the piano. Maya was aware of none of this. She was somewhere else entirely, lost in the music. Her world had narrowed to just her and the piano, the way it always did when she played. She could feel every note resonating through her body, could sense the vibrations traveling up through the bench, through the floor, through the very air around her. Her left hand attacked a particularly difficult passage, the notes coming so fast they almost blurred together, but each one was crystal clear, perfectly articulated. Her teacher had warned her that this section tripped up even advanced students. But Maya had practiced it thousands of times, breaking it down into smaller pieces, building up the speed gradually, until her fingers could navigate it as naturally as walking. The melody in her right hand soared above the turbulent accompaniment, fierce and uncompromising. This was Chopin writing about revolution, about his homeland being invaded, about the rage of watching something you love being destroyed. Maya poured all her own emotions into those notes. All the frustration of being underestimated, all the anger at being judged before she'd even had a chance. All the determination to prove that she belonged here, that she deserved to be taken seriously. Her face reflected every shift in the music. During the aggressive sections, her jaw tightened, her expression intense. During the brief moments of lyrical beauty, her features softened, almost peaceful. She swayed slightly with the rhythm, her whole body engaged in the performance, not just her hands. The technical demands of the piece were relentless. There was a moment halfway through where the left hand had to execute a series of rapid jumps across 2 octaves, while maintaining perfect rhythmic precision. Maya's hand flew through the air, landing exactly where it needed to be every single time. No hesitation, no fumbling, just absolute confidence. In the audience, Maya's mother had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She had heard her daughter practice this piece hundreds of times at home. But there was something different about this performance. Something fiercer, more powerful. Maya wasn't just playing the notes. She was making a statement. The music built toward the climactic section where both hands had to work in perfect coordination. The left hand driving forward with unstoppable momentum, while the right hand proclaimed the melody with defiant strength. This was the moment where the technical difficulty peaked, where everything could fall apart if the pianist's concentration wavered even slightly. Maya didn't waver. If anything, she seemed to gather more energy, attacking the keys with increased intensity. Sweat was beginning to bead on her forehead from the physical effort. Her breathing had quickened, but her playing remained absolutely controlled. Every note exactly where it needed to be, every dynamic precisely calibrated. Victor Rostov's expression had completely changed. The dismissive arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shock. He was leaning forward now, his elbows on the table, watching Maya with the kind of intense focus he usually reserved for studying the technique of world-class professionals. His mouth had fallen slightly open. The piece was approaching its conclusion. After all the fury and passion, Chopin brings the etude to a quieter, almost melancholic ending. It's a moment that requires great sensitivity, the ability to shift from overwhelming power to delicate introspection in just a few measures. Many pianists, caught up in the aggressive energy of the rest of the piece, miss this subtle emotional shift and end with too much volume, destroying the carefully crafted arc. Maya didn't miss it. As the music began to wind down, her touch became gentler, more nuanced. The anger and defiance gave way to something sadder, more reflective, like the exhaustion that comes after a battle. Her fingers caressed the keys now instead of attacking them. The volume decreased, the tempo slowed slightly, the whole character of the sound transformed. The final measures were barely above a whisper. Maya's left hand played a simple descending pattern while her right hand stated the main theme one last time, now stripped of all its earlier fury, just a quiet statement of survival. The last few notes fell like tears, soft and inevitable, and then silence. Maya's hands remained on the keys for a moment, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her whole body trembling from the effort and emotion. Slowly, she lifted her fingers away and placed her hands in her lap. She sat very still, waiting. For 3 full seconds, nobody in the audition hall moved. Nobody breathed. The silence was absolute. Then somewhere in the back row, someone started clapping. Within seconds, others joined in. And then suddenly the entire hall erupted in applause. People weren't just clapping politely the way they had for other performers. They were standing up, some of them with tears in their eyes, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. The boy who had performed earlier was on his feet, clapping so hard his hands hurt. The mother who had put away her phone was wiping her eyes with a tissue. Several of the other candidates were shaking their heads in amazement, looking at each other as if to confirm that what they'd just witnessed had really happened. Professor Morrison was standing, applauding vigorously. Dr. Wells had her hand over her heart, nodding with appreciation. Professor Chen was smiling broadly, clearly delighted. Maya sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. She could hear the applause washing over her like a wave, could feel the vibrations of people's feet as they stood. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't quite believe it was over, that she'd actually made it through the entire piece without a major mistake. Her mother was crying openly now, so proud she could barely stand it. But Maya wasn't looking toward her mother or the applauding audience. Her face was turned toward the judges' table, toward where Victor Rostov sat. Because his opinion was the one that mattered most right now. He was the one who had said she was wasting everyone's time. He was the one who needed to hear what she could do. The applause began to fade as people sat back down, waiting to hear what the judges would say. Maya's heart was pounding. She gripped the edge of the piano bench, trying to steady herself, and then Victor Rostov stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. His footsteps echoed across the stage as he walked toward the piano, toward Maya. Everyone watched, wondering what the famous pianist would say now, after what they'd all just witnessed. Maya heard him approaching, heard him stop just a few feet away from where she sat. She turned her face toward him, waiting, barely breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was completely different from before. Quieter, humbler, almost vulnerable. Victor Rostov stood there for a moment, just looking at the small girl sitting at the piano. Maya couldn't see his face, couldn't read his expression, but she could feel the weight of his gaze. The entire audition hall seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to hear what the legendary pianist would say. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that people in the back rows had to lean forward to hear. "I owe you an apology, young lady." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Had she heard him correctly? Victor took a step closer. "And I owe everyone in this room an apology as well." He turned to face the audience. His usual commanding presence somehow diminished. "In my 30 years as a professional musician, I have heard thousands of pianists. I have judged countless competitions. I have performed on the greatest stages in the world. And I thought I had learned everything there was to know about music. He paused, running a hand through his hair. It was a gesture that seemed completely at odds with the confident, almost arrogant man who had walked into the hall earlier that morning. But today, a 12-year-old girl has taught me that I still have much to learn. Maya felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She gripped the piano bench tighter, trying to process what was happening. "What you just played," Victor continued, his accent making each word deliberate and heavy with emotion, "was not just technically proficient. It was not merely correct, it was something far more rare and valuable. You didn't just play the notes on the page, you understood them, you felt them, you lived them." He turned back to Maya. "Most pianists, even very good ones, spend years trying to achieve that kind of musicality, that depth of interpretation. Many never get there at all. They can play everything perfectly, hit every note, maintain exact tempo, but the soul is missing. The understanding is missing." Dr. Wells was nodding from the judges' table. Professor Chen had a slight smile on his face. Professor Morrison was writing notes furiously, but Maya could hear the scratching of his pen slow down as he too listened to Victor's words. "When I made my comment earlier," Victor said, and now his voice carried a tone of genuine shame, "I allowed my assumptions to blind me. Ironic, isn't it? I stand here as someone who can see, but I was the one who was truly blind. Blind to possibility, blind to potential, blind to the fact that real vision, real insight, comes from somewhere much deeper than the eyes." Maya heard her mother stifle a sob from somewhere in the audience. She wanted to turn around to find her mom, but she couldn't move. She was frozen in place, overwhelmed by everything that was happening. "You have perfect pitch," Victor continued. "That much is obvious, but more than that, you have perfect understanding. Every phrase was shaped with intention. Every dynamic change served the emotional arc of the piece. The way you handled the transition to the ending section, that moment where the fury gives way to exhaustion and sadness, that showed interpretive maturity that I rarely hear from musicians twice your age." He walked over to the judges' table and picked up a water bottle, taking a long drink. Maya could hear the nervousness in his movements. This was clearly difficult for him, admitting he had been wrong in front of so many people. "I have built my career on being honest," he said, setting the bottle down. "Sometimes brutally so. People call me harsh, demanding, difficult. And I have always believed that this honesty was necessary, that it served the music. But today I learned the difference between honest criticism and prejudiced judgment." He came back to stand near the piano. "I judged you before you played a single note. I made assumptions about what you could or couldn't do based on your disability. I told myself I was being realistic, that I was saving everyone time. But really, I was just being lazy, and worse, I was being discriminatory." The word hung in the air. No one had expected Viktor Rostov to use such a strong term about his own behavior. "In Russia, where I grew up," he continued, "there is a saying, 'The eyes believe themselves, the ears believe other people.' I have spent my whole life believing what I could see. Today you taught me to trust what I hear, and what I heard was extraordinary." Maya felt tears running down her cheeks now. She couldn't help it. All the tension, all the fear, all the hurt from his earlier words. It was all coming out at once, but mixed with the pain was something else. Relief, validation, the overwhelming feeling of being truly seen, truly understood, by someone who mattered. Victor reached out, and for a moment, Maya tensed, unsure what he was doing. But then she felt him gently touch her shoulder, a gesture of respect. "You have a gift," he said softly. "A real gift. Not in spite of your blindness, but perhaps because of it. You hear things that others miss. You feel things that others overlook. Your other senses have sharpened to compensate, yes. But it's more than that. You have developed a relationship with music that is pure and direct. You don't get distracted by the visual. You don't rely on muscle memory alone. Every time you play, you have to truly listen, truly feel." He stepped back and addressed the other judges. "I don't know how the rest of you will vote, but I want to make my position clear. This young lady has demonstrated not only exceptional technical ability, but also the kind of musical sensitivity that cannot be taught. She belongs in this program. In fact, I believe she could teach the rest of us more than we could teach her. Professor Morrison looked up from his notes, clearly surprised by the complete reversal in Victor's opinion. That's quite an endorsement, Mr. Rostov, especially given your earlier concerns. My earlier concerns were unfounded, Victor said firmly, and I was wrong. I am not too proud to admit that. Dr. Wells cleared her throat. I think we can all agree that what we just witnessed was exceptional. The question is whether Miss Chen can handle the full demands of the program. Mr. Rostov, you mentioned concerns about reading music in real time, coordinating with conductors, performing with ensembles. Do you still believe those are obstacles? Victor thought for a moment. I believe they are challenges. But after hearing her play, I no longer believe they are insurmountable. This is someone who has clearly found ways to adapt, to work around limitations, to develop alternative methods that achieve the same results. Perhaps even better results, he turned back to Maya. Tell me, how do you learn new pieces? Walk me through your process. Maya took a shaky breath, trying to compose herself enough to answer. My teacher plays the piece for me first, or I listen to a recording. Usually just once or twice. Then I start working through it on my own, section by section. I break it down into smaller parts and practice each part until my fingers remember it. Then I put it all together. And you memorize everything this way? Yes, I can't read music, so I have to. Victor nodded slowly. Do you know what that means? Every piece you play from deep memorization. Most pianists rely heavily on sheet music, even for pieces they've played many times. But you have trained your mind to hold entire compositions perfectly. That's remarkable. He looked at the other judges again. I have one more question for Miss Chen. May I? Professor Morrison nodded. Of course. Victor knelt down so he was at Maya's level. She could hear the creak of his knees, could sense him getting closer. Why did you choose the Revolutionary Etude? He asked. It's an extremely difficult piece. You could have chosen something safer. Something that would show your skills without taking such a risk. Why this particular work? Maya thought about her answer carefully. Because of what it means. Chopin wrote it when his country was being invaded. He was far from home and he felt helpless. All he could do was write music. The etude is angry and sad at the same time. It's about fighting even when you don't think you can win. Her voice grew stronger. Today, when you said I was wasting everyone's time, I felt like that. Like I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. But then I thought, no, I'm going to play anyway. I'm going to show them. That's what Chopin did. He couldn't fight with weapons, so he fought with music. And that's what I wanted to do too. The hall was completely silent. Even Victor seemed at a loss for words. Finally, he stood up, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. You are going to be a great pianist someday. Not a great blind pianist, just a great pianist. Because that's what you are. The blindness is simply a fact about you, not a definition of you. He extended his hand, then realized Maya couldn't see it. May I shake your hand? Maya nodded, reaching out. His hand was large and calloused, the hand of someone who had spent decades at the piano. He shook hers gently but firmly. Thank you for the lesson today, he said. I won't forget it. The judges asked Maya to step outside while they deliberated. Her mother guided her back down the aisle, past the other candidates who watched her with a mixture of awe and envy. In the hallway outside the audition hall, Maya collapsed into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the performance was draining away, leaving her shaky and overwhelmed. I can't believe that just happened, she whispered. Her mother sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You were incredible, sweetheart. I've never heard you play like that. It was like you were channeling something beyond yourself. Do you think I have a chance? I mean, really? After what Victor Rostov just said? After that performance? Yes, I think you have more than a chance, but Maya wasn't so sure. There were still 29 other candidates, many of them older, more experienced. Just because she'd had one good performance didn't mean she deserved the scholarship more than them. And what if the judges thought Victor had gone too far in his praise? What if they thought he was just trying to make up for his earlier comments? The minutes crawled by. Other candidates came and went, finishing their auditions. Some looked confident. Others looked defeated. Maya tried not to think about what was happening behind those closed doors. Tried not to imagine the judges debating her performance, weighing her abilities against everyone else's. After what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes. Professor Morrison opened the door and called everyone back inside. Maya's heart started racing again. This was it. They were going to announce the winner. The candidates filed back into the audition hall, taking their seats. Maya could feel the tension in the air, could hear people shifting nervously, whispering to each other. Her mother's hand found hers and squeezed tight. Professor Morrison stood at the front of the room, looking out at all the young faces waiting for his words. First, I want to thank all of you for coming today. The level of talent we've witnessed has been truly exceptional. Every single person in this room should be proud of what they've accomplished. Maya's stomach churned. Here it comes, she thought. The You're All Winners speech before they announce the actual winner. Choosing a single recipient for this scholarship has been one of the most difficult decisions we've ever had to make. Morrison continued. We've deliberated extensively, and I want you to know that this decision was not made lightly. Just say it, Maya thought. Just tell us. The Belmont Conservatory Scholarship for this year goes to Maya Chen. For a second, Maya thought she'd misheard. The blood was rushing in her ears so loudly that she couldn't quite process the words. But then her mother gasped beside her, pulling her into a tight hug, and Maya realized it was real. It was actually real. She'd won. The room erupted in applause. Some of it was genuine, celebrating her achievement. Some of it was probably more polite, coming from disappointed candidates who had wanted that scholarship for themselves. But Maya barely heard any of it. She was too stunned, too overwhelmed to fully comprehend what had just happened. Professor Morrison wasn't finished. But that's not all. Mr. Rostov has asked to say something. Victor stepped forward and the room quieted down. Miss Chen, what I witnessed today has affected me deeply. I have taught only 3 private students in my entire career. I am very selective about who I work with, because teaching requires time and energy that I usually devote to performing. But I would like to extend an invitation to you. I would be honored if you would allow me to mentor you, in addition to your work here at the conservatory. Maya felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Victor Rostov wanted to mentor her. The same man who had dismissed her 2 hours ago now wanted to be her teacher. I cannot promise to be an easy teacher, Victor continued, a slight smile in his voice. I will push you. I will challenge you. But I believe you have something truly special, and I would like to help you develop that gift to its fullest potential. Maya's mother leaned close and whispered, What do you want to say, honey? What did she want to say? There were 1,000 thoughts racing through her mind, but when she opened her mouth, what came out was simple and honest. Yes. Thank you. I'd love to learn from you. Victor nodded, clearly pleased. Good. We'll start next month once you've settled into the conservatory program. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. People came up to congratulate Maya, to shake her hand, to tell her how inspiring her performance had been. Several of the other candidates were genuinely kind, saying they'd learned something from watching her courage. Others were less enthusiastic, but Maya tried not to let that bother her. She knew not everyone would be happy about the outcome. As they were leaving the conservatory, a local news reporter approached them. She'd been covering the auditions for a human interest piece and wanted to interview Maya. Her mother started to politely decline, but Maya surprised herself by saying yes. Maybe her story could help someone else. Maybe some other kid out there who thought they couldn't do something would hear about this and find the courage to try. The interview was brief. The reporter asked about her blindness, about how she learned to play, about what she felt during the performance. Maya answered honestly, trying not to sugarcoat the challenges, but also emphasizing that those challenges hadn't stopped her. When the reporter asked what she wanted people to take away from her story, Maya thought carefully before responding. I want people to know that limitations are often in our minds more than in our circumstances. Yes, I'm blind. Yes, that makes some things harder, but it doesn't make my dreams impossible. And I think that's true for everyone. Whatever challenge you're facing, whatever people tell you that you can't do, at least try. At least give yourself the chance to prove them wrong, because you might surprise yourself. The interview aired that evening on the local news. By the next morning, someone had posted a video of Maya's performance on social media. By the afternoon, it had a few thousand views. By the end of the week, it had gone viral, racking up millions of views from around the world. People commented from every corner of the globe. Parents of children with disabilities saying they'd shown the video to their kids. Musicians talking about how moved they were by her interpretation. Teachers using her story in their classrooms to talk about perseverance and overcoming prejudice. Even famous pianists shared the video, praising her technique and musicality. But Maya tried not to get caught up in the attention. She had work to do. The conservatory program was starting soon, and Victor had already sent her a list of pieces he wanted her to begin learning. The list was intimidating, full of advanced works that would push her to new levels, but she was ready for the challenge. 2 years later, Maya stood backstage at Carnegie Hall waiting to walk out for her first solo concert. She was 14 now, taller, more confident, but still the same girl who had walked into that audition hall and refused to give up. Victor was in the audience tonight along with her mother, her teachers, and hundreds of other people who had come to hear her play. As she made her way to the piano, guided by a stagehand, she thought about how far she'd come, from that moment of humiliation on the audition stage to this moment of triumph on one of the world's most famous stages. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been plenty of difficult days, frustrating practice sessions, moments when she doubted herself. But she'd kept going. And now here she was. She sat at the piano, taking a moment to feel the weight of the moment. Somewhere in the audience, Victor was watching. The same man who had once said she was wasting everyone's time. But he'd learned. He'd changed. He'd become one of her greatest supporters. Maya placed her hands on the keys and looked out toward the audience even though she couldn't see them. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, amplified by the microphone. I want to dedicate tonight's performance to everyone who has ever been told they can't achieve their dreams. To everyone who has faced doubt, discrimination, or dismissal. You can do this. You can achieve amazing things. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, not even the voices in your own head. The audience applauded warmly. Maya smiled, took a deep breath, and began to play. In the third row, Viktor Rostov sat with tears in his eyes, watching the student who had become his teacher. The girl who had shown him that true vision comes from the heart, not the eyes. The young woman who had reminded him why he fell in love with music in the first place. And as Maya's fingers danced across the keys, filling Carnegie Hall with beautiful, powerful, defiant music, everyone in that audience knew they were witnessing something special. Not because she was blind, but because she was brilliant. Because she was brave. Because she refused to let anything stop her from sharing her gift with the world. That night, Maya didn't just play music. She proved something that needed proving. She inspired thousands who needed inspiration, and she showed that the only real limitations we face are the ones we accept.